Good morning, dear students. I am audible.
Morning,
Dear
sir.
students, I am
Audible,
audible.
sir.
Good morning, sir.
Pardon?
Yes, sir, audible.
Okay. So, very good morning, dear students. Welcome to OMDP online class. So, as we are making some discussions yesterday, isn't it? So, related to finding the classes. In particularly, we have made some discussions related to system conception. Then we have made some discussions related to the domain class model, overview of analysis. Then the domain class model. Okay, so domain class model and as well as application class model are the two major concepts comes under analysis, overview of analysis. Okay, now coming back to this domain class model. Okay, so this is one of the process in software development. So where we are going to identify the classes. So in order to identify the classes, we are going for some strategies, and among them, the one most common strategy we follow is a non-phrase approach. Okay, so if you consider any case study, real world scenario, how to identify the given classes in that particular context can be done by using non-phrases. So, and we have considered an example also in our previous class, that is a ATM case study. Then if you consider an ATM case, what kind of different type of classes which comes under. So all these things we have considered yesterday. Now, so if you consider all the classes, synonymous classes, there may be some classes which are relevant, and there may be some classes which are value classes, means irrelevant classes. There may be some redundant classes, means duplicate classes. So how to eliminate these are spurious classes? Okay. So in order to do this, okay, so we are going to follow once again some methodology. So what kind of methodology, all those things I am going to discuss now. Just I am going to share the PDF, dear students can go. Can you see the PDF, dear students?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
Fine. So this is what yesterday we have taken. Now we have taken a case study on ATM. So these are some of the classes which are extracted from the problem statement with the perspective of a common noun. Okay, like we have a software, we have a banking network, we have a cashier, then we have ATM, consortium, bank computer, account, transaction, cashier station, account data, transaction data, central computer, cash card, user, cash, receipt system, record keeping provision, security provision, access, cost, customer. So all these things constitute together. We constitute them as the different type of nouns. Okay. So ATM classes extracted from the problem statement. Now additional classes. Some of the classes may not be considered. Okay. Some of the classes may not be considered in the initial cases. And these classes which are not considered in the initial cases may be ignored due to some causes or reasons, can be reconsidered in the later stages. For example, here we have another class called as a communication line. So the meaning of a communication line is nothing but an internet, okay, or any leased line. Okay, so how to so we have forgotten that, isn't it, in the earlier cases. So now it will be included now. That is communication line. Similarly, transaction log means a customer arrives, at what time he will arrive, on what date he will arrive, okay, how long he will stay in the ATM, okay, and what kind of transactions he will is going to conduct. So all these things you can call this as a transaction log. Now coming back to this domain class model, so the very important concept here is keeping the right classes. Now, I mean those relevant ಅಥವಾ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿರುವಂತ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು we have to eliminate, we have to remove the unnecessary classes. So that is the one of the first step in the domain class model. So that is discard unnecessary and incorrect classes according to the following criteria. So we can't simply do this, okay? We have to follow a strategy. We have to follow a particular logic, so through which we can eliminate the unnecessary things or unnecessary classes. So the criteria what we are going to follow in order to eliminate these unnecessary classes or incorrect classes will be given here. Okay, so among them, the first one is redundant classes. So redundant classes, all of you know this word redundancy. Okay, redundancy is one of the word which is coined in the DBMS, and you know very well redundancy ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ duplicate data. So illu kuda ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ duplicate classes ಬರಬಹುದು. Means if you have two classes, the meaning of the two classes is same. So this, for example, yesterday we have discussed now. So one is a user and another one is a customer. Okay, so both of these represents the same. So these are called as a redundant classes. If two classes express the same concept, we should keep any one of them and we can eliminate the another one. Means we can keep the most descriptive, means which is more and more related to the context. We will retain it, and which may not to some extent related can be ignored or eliminated. So if you consider the example in ATM example, customer and user, then okay, and you people also identified few things. The customer and user are the redundant, and we retain the customer because it is more descriptive when compared to the user, because user means any user. Okay, it is not that much descriptive or not that much relevant to the ATM context. On the other hand, if you consider the customer class, it is more and more relative and more descriptive. So the first criteria is over, that is redundant classes. Second criteria. Second criteria is irrelevant classes. Irrelevant means it is not related to our context. ATM ಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧ ಪಡದೇ ಇರುವಂತ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್ ಕೂಡ ಬರಬಹುದು. Okay, so how to eliminate these type of classes? So example, so irrelevant classes alli baradu appointing cost is outside the scope of the ATM software. Okay, apportioning cost. Apportioning cost is nothing but suppose if you are going for an ATM, if your ATM card belongs to SBI, okay, and if you are going for something other bank like Canara Bank and all. So in that scenario, what happens? Sometimes they will incur the service charges because you are using a ATM card belongs to some heterogeneous bank, because it is not belongs to the homogeneous bank. In this scenario, what happens? Some service charge will be given. Now, so that service charge are incurring this apportioning cost. It is not relevant as the Hilton because it is related to the bank. It is not related to the ATM. So that is why we can, to some extent, we can consider this apportioning cost can be considered as an irrelevant class. Next, value classes. Value antandre, which is not clearly defined. We can also call this as ambiguity. Okay, so not clearly defined. So value classes. So a value classes should be specific. Means if you are defining a class not in a that much clear manner, you have to redefine it. So next, attributes or characteristics. That is names that primarily describe individual objects should be restated as attributes. So for example, if you consider names that are primarily described as objects adana ನಾವು sometimes, for example, ಈಗ name ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Name ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ ಅದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ attribute ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಹೊರತು class ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ name, because if you consider any student, the name will be taken as a attribute. Similarly, if you consider a customer, name will be taken as an attribute, not a class. So this is the thing you should have more and more clarity. You should clearly separate the attribute and the object. Next, behaviors or operations. If a name describes an operation, that is applied to the objects and not manipulated in its own right, then it is not a class. If you consider a name, okay, if a name describes an operation, the operation and it has a specific name, and in that scenario it is not manipulated in its own, okay, then it is not a class. For example, if we are simply building telephones, okay, then call is a part of the state model and not a class. Okay, if you are simply building a telephones, okay, you on the telephone system ಗೆ ಒಂದು classes na identify ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ call is a part of the state model. State diagram ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ already explain ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೆ telephone line. I think I have given this for a year also. Okay, so in that particular diagram, call will be taken as a state model, not as a class. Call ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಪ್ಪ ಒಂದು particular ಒಂದು operation ಅದು. Okay, it is not going to be a class ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. Means it should be very very clear. So what is going to be an operation and what is going to be a class. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ separation ಮಾಡೋದು ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ಇದೇ attribute, ಇದೇ class. ಇದೇ operation, ಇದೇ class. Next, roles ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ what kind of the responsibility one will play with respect to the given context. So the name of the class should be reflect its intrinsic nature and not a role that it plays on a association. Now name of the class ಅನ್ನು ತಗೊಳ್ತೀವಿ as a one of the built-in nature ಅಂತ ತಗೊಳ್ತೀವಿ ಹೊರತು it is not going to be with respect to the association end, because association end ಅಲ್ಲಿ we can identify the roles. For example, if you consider owner of a car, okay, owner of a car in a car manufacturing database, not correct as a class. Owner ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬರಲ್ಲ. It can be a person ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು, okay, because person ಒಳಗಡೆ ಓನರ್ ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಓನರ್ can be considered as an attribute, as a role ಅಂತ ತಗೋಬೋದೇ ಹೊರತು owner itself is not a class ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ. On the other hand, person can be considered as a class because person means anything which is general, which may include a owner, which may, so because a car can be used in many different ways, or the different roles a person can play with respect to a car. Like a person can play a role of a owner, a person can play a role of a driver, okay, a person can play a role of a lessee. Lessee means he wants to learn a car, learners antaralla, okay, like that. So next, implementation constructs. How to implement these classes, how to identify the classes, how to implement them. So eliminate constructs from analysis model that are extraneous in the real world. We may need them during the design and not now. Idu ee particular concept namage munde barutte, and design alli nanu nimage idana heltene. Next, generalization andre enappa derived classes means if there is any possibility of parent or a generic class or maybe an abstract class, if there is any possibility of a concrete class, then you can find out the association between them. So that is a general rule of classes that can be derived from other classes. One class in the ಇನ್ನೊಂದು class na derived ಮಾಡುವಂತ classes ಗಳನ್ನ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ತಗೋಬಹುದು. So how to represent them? We can represent them by using a slash. On the slash na use ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು we can identify this as a derived class and this is a super class. So this diagram depicts you the entire information we have classified here. Okay, we have clearly classified all the classes which we have considered in the ATM case study. So based on two major classes, one is called as a bad class and another one is called as a good class. So under bad class, once again there is a subclassification like value classes, attribute classes, redundant classes, implementation classes, and irrelevant classes. And coming back to the good classes, we have few classes. So there is no subclassification over there in the good classes. On the other hand, if you go for bad classes, definitely there is going to be a subclassification. So now under this, the bad classes, what are the different subclassification? The first category or the first class is a value class. Now value classes are those classes which are not clearly defined. So we cannot come to a conclusion clearly. This is going to be a class, this particular system. Like for example, a system will always represent a general aspect. It is never going to explain a particular concept. System ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಆಗಬಹುದು, ಒಂದು ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಗಬಹುದು, ಒಂದು ಬ್ಯಾಂಕಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಗಬಹುದು, ರಿಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಆಗಬಹುದು, ಅಥವಾ ಎನಿಥಿಂಗ್. General we can call it as a system. Similarly, security provision, once again, a security provision can be anything. It may be through the login credentials, it may be through the palm, it may be through the retinal scanning, it may be through the fingerprint scanning, okay, it may be face recognition, so whatever it is. So security provision, once again, a general word, it never comes to a conclusion that this is a particular aspect so through which we can authorize a given customer. Next, we have record keeping provision, means maintenance of data. Okay, maintenance of record and data. Okay, how to maintain the record in the databases. So this is also not that much clearly defined. We have banking network. Once again, it is not clearly defined what kind of network, whether it is the internet or intranet, or it is going to be a leased line, or whatever the type of connection, wireless communication. So it is not clearly that much defined. So that is why these classes can be declared as a value classes, because they are not clearly defined. Similarly, in these bad classes, we have another category called as a attribute. So always we remember that attribute is nothing but the distinguishable characteristics of a given object. Okay? So now if you consider account data is one of the data which belongs to account. So that is why account data can be considered as an attribute, not as a class. Receipt will be generated with respect to a given transaction. That is why receipt is not a class. On the other hand, receipt can be declared as a attribute. Similarly, cash will be ejected based on the transaction, the debit transaction a customer will perform. So cash is not going to be a class. On the other hand, cash will be declared as an attribute. Similarly, the data, transaction data. So every transaction has some information or data like transaction date, time, transaction ID, type of transaction, amount debited. So everything will be considered. So once again, this is also going to be an attribute, not going to be a class. Next, we have a irrelevant, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಂಬಂಧನೇ ಪಡದೇ ಇರೋಂಥದ್ದು. ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ATM ಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧ ಪಡೆದಿರೋದು ಯಾವುದು? ಕಾಸ್ಟ್. ನಾನು ಆಗಲೇ ನಿಮಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಅಪಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ, ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ. So sometimes what happens, a given customer may be using a heterogeneous cards with respect to a bank. He is not using a same category bank debit card. He may be using a card which maybe belongs to some different companies or different banking enterprises, maybe some private sectors also. So in this case, some cost will be given, service charge will be deducted. So that is not irrelevant anta ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. Next, implementation classes anta ಕರೀತಾನೆ, like transaction log, access, software, communication line. ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಏನಪ್ಪಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ implementation means designing a software, programming concepts, transaction data, everything will be considered in the programming. So that is why we will consider them under the category of the implementation. So altogether we can consider 5 different bad classes. Now coming back to the good classes category, we have account. So every customer has his own account. Every customer can perform a transaction in a machine called as an ATM. So next we have a bank as a good class. Bank computer is a good class. Cash card means what kind of debit cards you are using. Visa cards, okay, and like that. Okay, so that is a type of a card. Next, master cards also, sometimes you may know that. Okay, and similarly we have a cashier. Cashier means a person will come, will look after the system. If the funds are less in the given ATM machines, he will periodically comes and he will load the money into that particular device. Next, cashier station. Cashier station means a given machine belongs to a one particular cashier station. Means it's a local another banking network station. If the funds are in a scarcity, we can consider it can borrow the money from the nearby station called as a cashier station. Where central computer is nothing but a server to which our ATM machine is directly connected. So where we can use the different type of information which is stored to the customer in a databases. Consortium is a collection of different type of banks. Nowadays you have seen so many 3 or 4 banks, they have been merged as a one particular consortium. And customer, of course, customer is a main important aspect in the ATM case study, because customers will always come. He is the main user. He will come, he will make some transaction, either it may be debit transaction, mini statement, change the PIN. Sometimes The corporation bank kiosks, they will allow the customers to deposit the money also. Okay, so these are some of the transactions a customer can perform. Similarly, transaction is also considered as a class, because transaction ID, transaction number will be the attribute of a transaction. So altogether we can declare these are some of the good classes. Okay. So please be careful, you may get a question in the examination. So define a domain class model, and explain the concept of ATM case study and identify the good classes. Okay, ಇತರ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು. So 10 marks question. In this scenario, you have to first define what is going to be a domain class model. Then you have to define all the classes in the ATM case study. Once you define all the classes in the ATM case study, next you segregate them into different classes. That is bad classes and good classes. And in the bad classes, once again you classify them as a values, redundant, attribute, implementation, and irrelevant classes. And on the other hand, we always have some good classes. So next, preparing data dictionary. So data dictionary, and it is to some extent we can call the data dictionaries as a metadata, and a data which explains another data. Okay. Similarly, we need this data dictionary in domain class model. What is the significance of using the data dictionary while building the domain class model? Now I'm going to narrate all these things to you. So prepare a data dictionary for all modeling elements. Andre ondondu modeligu kuda ondu explanation kodbeku ನೀವು. So why I am using this particular model? What is the necessary of this? What are the different classes involved? What is this class is going to do? So information, okay? Because we know that data dictionary and then if you have some confusions related to the English word, then what you will do? You will go to a dictionary, you will search, identify the meaning in Kannada. So you will come to clarity. This is the meaning of this. Similarly, in some scenarios, we may be in some kind of confusions. So in order to identify, we are going to build a data dictionary. Okay. Just like a help manual, so that we can understand the model in a much more better way. So describe the scope of the class within the current problem. So what is the scope? Scope andre enu application of the class in a given problem. Next, including all the assumptions or restrictions. Okay, what needs to be done and what need not to be done. So called as a restriction. Next, data dictionary. DD andre data dictionary. DD also describes associations, attributes, operations, and enumeration values. Now, once you define a data dictionary, so before data dictionary, we have defined classes, we have identified the classes. Among them, we have identified good classes and bad classes. Once the classes have been clearly defined in domain class model, the next one is prepare a data dictionary. In this data dictionary, we have to describe the associations. What is association? Relationship between the classes. What is the attribute? States, the distinguishable characteristics. Operations, nothing but the behaviors, the dynamic nature of the objects. And enumerations, already I have explained this, the values which are fixed, okay, which is never going to be considered some outside of the set. For example, week, day, month, I have given the explanation about all these things in the module 1, I think. Next. Yes, data dictionary for the ATM classes. Now, if you consider the same, that is the ATM case study. So these are some of the data dictionary concepts. Like we have to clearly define what is going to be an account. The account is nothing but a transaction details of a given customer, type of account, then the amount, the balance amount. So on which date the account has been opened, account ID. Next, in which bank the account has been opened, IFSC code, like that. If you just see the bank account passbook, if you have a SB account, you can come to know that. So bank, to which bank the account belongs. Okay, so this is we have to clearly explain what is going to be a bank. A bank is nothing but a financial organization which maintains financial data of a given customer. So it will consider the currency or the money or the funds which maintains the different type of accounts, and every different persons will be working under a bank. And we have a debit card, a type of a card, Visa, MasterCards, all those things, credit cards, the limits, Okay, how much we can make the transaction per day, or and the limitations and all those things. Every card, it has a unique numbers, and we have CVV information at the backside, magnetic strip, okay, magnetic data which has been encoded. So this is all information belongs to cash card. Similarly, cashier station means a local station, neighboring station related to a given ATM. Suppose if the cash is very less, immediately we can borrow the cash from the nearby cashier stations. And consortium is nothing but a collection, or it's a group, it's a cluster of banks. And transaction means it is nothing but log information about the customers which who are going to make some transactions related to the date, time, ID, how much amount has been deducted. Next we have a ATM. ATM itself is going to be, you have to explain what is going to be an ATM. It is a automatic teller machine which can work without any human intervention. With a given leased line, it is going to fetch the details of a customer based on the adequate amount of credentials given by the customers. Next, bank computers are nothing but the computers which are locally connected to the ATMs, and we have cashiers, means the person who will maintain the cash. Central computers are the servers which will maintain the repository or information of the databases of the customers. And of course, customer himself, who is a customer, he is an actor, who is a user, who will open the account in a bank, and he will maintain the account. He will sometimes he will perform the debit operation, sometimes he may perform credit operations. So he will entire information about the customers. So altogether, we have to clearly define the data dictionary. So this is all about the concepts what I have explained today. So I'm going to stop here. From my next class, I'm going to associations. Okay. So find associations. ಈಗ ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ATM ಕೇಸ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ತಗೊಂಡೆ. ATM ಕೇಸ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿಲಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ? Finding the class ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. So class ನ ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ which technique we have adopted? Anybody? Dear students, which technique we have used in order to identify the classes? Students, I am audible. Dear students, are you there? I am audible. I am audible, dear students. Okay, fine. So in order to identify the classes, we are going for a noun phrase approach. Noun phrases. Similarly, in order to identify the associations, we are going for a verb phrases. So verb ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಕ್ರಿಯಾಪದ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ ನಾವು ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, okay, which always going to represent some course of action. Okay, so based on this approach, we are going to identify the associations. So this one I am going to explain in my next class. Okay, shall we stop here? Shall we stop here? Dear students, shall we stop here?
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, dear students, for joining OMDP online class. Have a nice day. Please take care of yourself. Thank you so much.